Hello, my favorite fourth graders. We're going to start reading chapter 7 and 8 because they're both little ones. And we ended where the boom, rat-a-tat-tat, boom, rat-a-tat-tat. The drum was being played by the dad. Okay. Chapter 7. And what was our own favorite member of the mouse community doing while the sound of the mouse council drum echoed through the walls of the castle? Reader, I must report that Furlough had not seen the worst of it. Despereaux sat with the princess and the king and listened to the song after song. At one point, gently, oh so gently, the pea picked up the mouse in her hand. She cupped him in his palm and scratched his oversized ears. Can you imagine? You sweet little thing. Well, now he's just head over heels in love with this girl, right? I know. You have lovely ears, the pea said to him. They are like small pieces of velvet. Despereaux thought that he might faint with the pleasure of someone referring to his ears as small and lovely. He laid his tail against the pea's wrist and steadied himself, and he felt the princess's pulse, the pounding of her heart, and his own heart immediately took up the rhythm of hers. Papa, the pea said when the music was over, I'm going to keep this mouse. We are going to be great friends. The king looked at Despereaux, cupped in his daughter's hand, his narrowed eyes. A mouse, he muttered. A rodent? What? Said P. Put it down, said the king commanded. No, said P., who was a person not at all used being told what to do. I mean, why should I? Because I told you to. But why? Protested P. Because it's a mouse. I know. I'm the one that told you he was a mouse. I wasn't thinking, said the king. Thinking of what? Your mother, the queen. My mother? Said P sadly. Mice are rodents, said the king. He adjusted his crown. They are related to rats, and you know how we feel about rats. You know of our own dark history with rats. The pea shuddered. But Papa, she said, he's not a rat. He's a mouse, and there is a difference. Royalty, the king said, has many responsibilities, and one of them is not becoming involved personally with even the distant relatives of one's enemies. Put him down, P. The princess put Despereaux down. Good girl, he said the king. And then he looked at Despereaux. Scat, he said. Despereaux, however, didn't scat. He sat and stared at the princess. The king stomped his foot and he said, Scat! Papa, said the princess, please don't be mean to him. And she began to weep. Despereaux, seeing her tears, broke the last of the great ancient rules of mice. He spoke. He spoke to a human. Please, said Despereaux, don't cry. And he held out his handkerchief to the princess. The pea sniffed and leaned down close to him. Do not speak to her, thundered the king. Despereaux dropped his handkerchief. He backed away from the king. Rodents do not speak to princesses. We will not have this becoming a topsy-turvy, wrong-headed world. There are rules. Scat, get lost before my common sense returns and I have you killed. The king stamped his foot again, and Despereaux found it alarming to have such a big foot brought down with such force and anger so close to his own little small head. He ran toward the hole in the wall. But he turned before he entered it. He turned and he shouted to the princess, My name is Despereaux. Despereaux, she said. I honor you, shouted Despereaux. I honor you was what the knight had said in the fair maiden in the story that Despereaux read every day in the book in the library. Despereaux had murmured and muttered the phrase often to himself, but he had never before this evening had an occasion to use it when speaking to someone else. "Get out of here," shouted the king, stamping his foot harder and then harder, still so it seemed as if the whole castle, the very world, were shaking. "Rodents know nothing of honor." Despereaux ran into the hole, and from there he looked out at the princess. She had picked up his handkerchief, and she was looking at him, right directly into his soul. "Despereaux," she said. He saw his name on her lips. "I honor you," whispered Despereaux. "I honor you." And he put his little paw over his heart, and he bowed so low that his whiskers touched the floor. He was, alas, a mouse that was deeply in love. Oh boy. Chapter 8, To the Rats. Can you even imagine what might happen? Oh, and then what about her mother? That's an interesting little tidbit into what happened previously, right? So we'll find out more about that. Obviously had to do with rats, had to do with his mother, or P's mother, his wife. Let's see. The Mouse Council, 13 honored mice and one most very honored head mouse, heeded the call of Leicester's drum and gathered in a small secret hole of King Philip's throne room. The 14 mice sat around a piece of wood balanced on spools of thread and listened in horror while Despereaux's father related the story of what Furlough had seen. "At the foot of the king," said Leicester. "Her finger right on top of his head," said Leicester. "He was looking up at her, and it was not in fear." He was looking up at her, and the Mouse Council members listened with their mouths open. They listened with their whiskers drooping and their ears flattened against their head. They listened in dismay and outrage and fear. When Leicester finished, there was a silence, dismal, deep. "Something," intoned the most very honored head mouse, "is wrong with your son. He is not well. This goes beyond his fears, or his fevers, beyond his large ears and his lack of growth. He is deeply disturbed. His behavior endangers us all. Humans cannot be trusted. We know this to be an indisputable fact. A mouse who consorts with humans, a mouse who would sit right at the foot of a man, a mouse who would allow a human to touch him, and here the entire Mouse Council indulged in a collective shiver of disgust. He cannot be trusted. That is the way of the world, our world. Fellow mice, it is my most fervent hope that Despereaux has not spoken to these humans. But obviously we can assume nothing, and this is the time to act and not wonder." Leicester nodded his head in agreement, and the 12 other members of the Mouse Council nodded their heads too. "We have no choice," said the head mouse. "He must go to the dungeon." He pounded his little fisted paw on the table. "He must go to the rats immediately. Members of the council, I will now ask you to vote. Those in favor of Despereaux being sent to the dungeon, say aye." There was a chorus of sad ayes. "Those opposed, say nay." Silence reigned in the room. Not even his father said nay. The only noise came from Leicester, because he was crying. And 13 mice, ashamed for Leicester, looked away. Reader, you can imagine your own father not voting against your being sent to the dungeon full of rats. Can you imagine him not saying one word in your defense? Despereaux's father wept, and the most very honored head mouse beat his paw against the table again and said, "Despereaux Tilling will appear before the mouse community. He will hear of his sins. He will be given a chance to deny them. If he does not deny them, then he will be allowed to renounce them so that he may go to the dungeon with a pure heart. Despereaux Tilling is hereby called to sit with the Mouse Council." At least, at least Lester had the decency to weep at his act of perfidy. Reader, do you know what the word perfidy means? I have a feeling you do, based on the little scene that has just unfolded here. But you should look up the word in your dictionary, just to be sure. Now, we're going to work on the worksheet tomorrow. I just wanted us to get that much. And I would encourage you, if it's this pretty, boy, you need to be outside. Outside reading this book, outside making these paper airplanes I'm going to send you a little link to. Maybe even outside playing with Legos. Who said you have to play with Legos inside, right? Love you guys and miss you.